Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy podcast. On this week's episode, we'll be chatting about the Vancouver and Natal Regional Championships, which took place this past weekend. Azul and I were both in Vancouver, so we'll be talking about our experience there. We'll talk about a player disqualification, a DQ that happened at Vancouver, give kind of our thoughts and opinions. There's definitely been a lot of conversation about it on Twitter. It was in regard to the players' sleeves being damaged. Definitely something that plenty of people have been talking about, not just for this player for this tournament, but several tournaments in the past. So we'll give our opinions on kind of what went down, what has at least been publicly made available there. We'll, of course, have Guess That Flavor Text, everyone's favorite segment of the podcast. It is my turn to pick this week. And we have the Utrecht special event in the Netherlands coming up this weekend. Talk about the meta for that event and what we think people should be expecting. Probably a lot of the same stuff. My name is Chip Ritchie, and I'm joined here as always by my friend and co-host, Azul GG. What's up, Azul? How we doing, man?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, played at Vancouver, broke my day 2 streak, unfortunately. I was on 13 in a row and then decided to play Lugia, or I should say the squad decided to play Lugia at Vancouver. I was kind of against it overall, but I didn't put up too much resistance because I didn't like the alternatives that we were talking about doing. So I was like, all right, Lugia is okay. Can't complain too much with playing the BIF, right? At the end of the day, I don't think playing the BIF is ever a bad decision when there really does seem to be like no hard counter in sight yet. We do still have like what 3 tournaments in this format with
It's
Utrecht
not
coming
happening,
up.
bro. It's not
Uh,
happening.
we got a couple more American tournaments. So if there's a hard counter out there before rotation hits and we get Scarlet and Violet, there's still a possibility to find it. But yeah, I couldn't complain with playing Lugia overall. Did not go my way this time, but I loved going to Vancouver. Lots of great places for food and just kind of a cool city in general. And like the convention center is super sick because I kind of on that. I remember like when I was in, it always kind of feels like you're out on a boat, but you're not really quite on a boat because you're kind of like out off on like a pier, I guess is like a better way to put it. But
Sure,
yeah, the
yeah.
convention center area is really, really cool. So love Vancouver. So yeah, I was excited to go back and play there once again. Chip, was this your first time in Vancouver?
Yeah, it was my first time in Vancouver. It was really yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool. I wish I had gotten to do more stuff there though, because I didn't get in until like 10 p.m. Friday night. So it was already dark.
Yeah.
and so I didn't even really get to see like how beautiful the city is because I've always heard that it's beautiful. And after that, I'm working all day Saturday and Sunday pretty much. Go home first thing Monday morning. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the catch 22 of this gig that I have where it's like I get to travel to all these really cool places, but I don't get to do a lot of cool things at the cool places, right? Unless I like take time and go
Yeah.
early or stay late, which is just not feasible to do whenever you're traveling every other weekend. But it was cool. I mean, like the sights I did get to see, it was really pretty. It was raining the whole time we were there, which is kind of a bummer. Had some Tim Hortons, trying to be like a Canadian, do what Canadians do. Um, but yeah, overall, it was a good tournament. I think we had a really good show. Pablo Meza came on as a caster for us. Kyle Puka Sukovic was supposed to be a caster. Of course, Puka, one of the OG Pokemon broadcasters, back in the early 2010s, he was doing event coverage when nobody else was. He now works at Pokemon, so he doesn't cast as many events, but he does a couple every now and then, it feels like. And he was supposed to cast in Vancouver. He and I were supposed to cast together, which I was super pumped about. But he ended up getting sick, so he couldn't come. Pablo Meza stepped in, and took his spot. And Kyle Sablehouse and I ended up casting together, which was also great. I love casting with Kyle. I think we're a good duo. I normally do like the analysis slash color commentary with most of the other people I'm paired with, but I actually prefer to do the play-by-play commentary. I just don't get to do it very often, and Kyle's one of the few people I get to do it with because he is like a pure color slash analyst caster. So I really enjoyed that. I think it took me a couple of rounds to like get back into the feel of doing play-by-play, but it felt good once we got there. I feel like by day two, our all of our rounds were super solid. Um, but yeah, it was good. I was a little disappointed to see that you and the squad played Lugia, but I mean, it feels, I don't know. I mean, you can't ever go that wrong with playing the BDIF, like you said. Of course, Grant and
Yeah.
Caleb both made day two. They both went into day two at 7-1-1 as well. and Caleb lost like 2 winning ins in a row, right? Which is a
Yeah.
bummer, but I gotta say, Azul, I mean, I gotta hold you accountable here because on January 11th, 2023, you did tweet, if you play Lugia, you're a bot. Azul, are you a bot?
For that tournament, I was definitely a bot alongside the other 30% of players in the room. It was definitely a bot experience. It doesn't really feel like I was playing Pokemon, to be honest. It felt very much, even when I played, like, it even felt better to play Mew Meloetta, to be honest, because you have to think. You don't have to think when you play Lugia. You basically just, like, for the most part, there's always going to be some thinking. I had a couple tough decisions here and there. A lot of my losses were pretty straightforward, though, just like whiffing turn 2 V Star, or I had like a decent amount of just like dead draws, like Pumpkaboo Pass stuff against the Mew. A couple of the Mews I played against, it was, they game three, going to game three, they got me with that Judge Path stuff. So it definitely didn't feel, it just did not feel as good as playing something like the Lost Box or Control. Or like I even said, like when I was playing Mellow at a Mew, even back at the beginning of post-COVID Pokemon, you have to do a lot of thinking with that deck. It just like that's part of the thing that I enjoy. Like I always like playing decks that make me have to work a little bit harder to come up with decisions. Even that makes me work a little bit harder as long as the deck contends for being, a top deck or a top deck in at least the meta for the tournament. I'm fine with that, right? Even if I'm thinking a little bit harder than my opponent or than the average deck I could pick from. Like, and definitely, I just didn't have that feeling with Lugia at all. It just felt like you just it's so boring.
So
Even
is
when
it
I was winning, it was so boring.
so is it safe to say the squad's not gonna go back down that path these last 2 tournaments in the format, Charlotte and Fort Wayne?
I don't think so. They all, even like Grant and Caleb. Like Caleb, yeah, Caleb was on, had 2 win-ins in a row. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get there yet because I think it was 3 win-ins overall, but would have bubbled at 31. I think Caleb played against Gabe in the last round of day 2. So they both, Gabe ended up bubbling, Caleb would have bubbled. But if
Yeah,
Caleb had won one of the 2 before that, then Caleb could have ID'd to 32.
yeah.
So yeah, even though Caleb was on like the winning end, they both kind of had the same feeling. It was just like, yeah, this is stupid. Like, why would we ever play this deck ever again? It's just unenjoyable. And like, and like how little you have to work, you also make your opponent work that little as well. You don't make your opponent work at all with Lugia for the most part. Like, um, everyone knows how to play against it and what to do with their deck. So
Yeah. Had to get it out of your system, I guess, right?
I could have kept it in my system until rotation hit, but
Not everyone. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it is what it
you
is.
can't go wrong with it. Like I said, you can't go wrong with it. Like, I was like, fine. Like they were really sick of playing Lost Box. I would have been fine with running Lost Box back, or maybe even like a control. But yeah, they wanted to, and I didn't like any of the other choices. So like, our middle ground for this, for the deck choice was Lugia in the end.
I did before we get into the results of the tournament. One other thing I did want to talk about that we did on the stream that was really fun. We did some more caster matches. We had another GLC battle, but also something we did that I thought was really cool and really fun is we did some retro format battles. We did the 2013 World Championships format. And the reason we chose to do that is because the 2013 regional championships was in Vancouver at that tournament, at that same venue, right? Is the same building.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. It felt like a little bit of a time capsule almost. I had a absolutely sick comeback against Kyle Sablehouse, thanks to N. It made me miss N so much. It was a 6-1 comeback, Azul. It was so sick.
Does
Anyone who
someone,
what's
when
up?
you guys do those matches, is someone casting them, or is it just like you guys
Yes.
playing?
No, someone was casting them. So Kyle
Okay,
and I
okay.
played, Pablo and Skarzig casted it.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't
Um,
sure how those work because even if you two were mic'd up, that could be entertaining as well. It's just like,
They do. So there is a mic at the table where you can
uh huh,
hear players. Like you can
yeah,
hear a little bit of players
a
talking
little bit.
whenever
Do they
it's
turn it up?
us. Yeah, they turn it up for us. They turned it up
Oh,
for
okay.
us. So you could hear us like laughing and having a good time. It was actually fun, honestly. I think like at the time a lot of people did not love the 2013 format, Laser Bank and stuff like that, right?
Who
But
was that? Who won that Worlds?
Jason with Darkrai.
Oh, yeah, that was okay. That was a solid
I
format.
think the format is fine and it's pretty fun to go play like not super competitively, like just go back and have
Yeah.
fun playing. I think like if you take what they did with the XY era and remove the ability to attack on turn 1, your format actually would be really good.
Blastoise
Um,
would be pretty good, I think, if you did that. I don't know. It would be that much
I mean
better.
Blastoise is I don't know. I mean I
Oh,
don't
wait,
think
the
it's
XY
changing. Is it
format. Well, you mean
changing?
that format?
No, when X and Y base set came out, so for 2014 Worlds, when X and Y base set came out is when they changed the rule that you couldn't attack turn 1.
Oh, so if they had done it for 2013, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like if you took the 2013 card pool and made it so you couldn't attack turn 1, I think it would make it better. I mean, I
Oh,
don't see how that makes
Blastoise would.
Blastoise. any better than it
Because
is
you're not getting it
already.
because you're not doing anything turn 1, and now your opponent can't attack you if they go first.
Yeah, I guess, but, like, the worst attack that you're gonna see is, like, a Thunderous, right, for the most part, which I
Going
guess
Darkrai.
theoretically can
Yeah.
KO,
Squirtle.
a Squirtle turn 1, right? And that's actually
I'm
what
just
happened
saying.
in mine and Kyle's game. He KO'd a Tynamo turn 1. I was playing, Eels, but had to come back. So if anyone missed it, go watch it. It was after, like, round 3 or something, round 3 or 4. But it was fun.
Yeah, it's definitely dope. You guys should do more of that. You
Also
definitely should do a I was gonna say,
go
yeah, I
ahead.
like the I well, if I was tuning into streams, I would definitely like preference. I would rather see that. I'm glad you guys are doing the old format stuff because if I was tuning into a stream, I'd definitely rather see the old format stuff than the GLC stuff. The GLC stuff, of course, is cool. Big fan of GLC, but yeah, because I even like messaged you like when I was watching, or I was like Pablo's tweet or something, or your tweet about the match that Pablo was playing with the fish going back to the deck or whatever in the GLC match. I like
Yeah,
messaged
yeah.
you. I was like, oh, you guys should do like old decks. Or old format stuff, and you're like, we did it at this tournament. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Uh,
it's actually cool to have a mix of the things, right? And we
yeah, yeah, for
we'll do
sure.
some, build and battle games as well at some point. I think we did that at LAIC. That was kind of the first
Oh, that's
caster
a good
battle we
idea.
did, so I think we're gonna do more things similar to that, and, yeah, it's definitely fun. It's a good time, so, I think that it's good that we have stuff like that because we need to kill the time sometimes, so it's, like, nice to have something like that in the back pocket that's fun, that lets us, like, show a little bit more of our personality on the stream, in addition to, like, covering the tournament, obviously. But this has been an 11-minute intro, so let's move on and move into the Vancouver and Natal Regional Championships, of course, which took place this past weekend. Vancouver in Canada, Natal, Brazil. And we did make some predictions last week that we should recap and talk about exactly where we were right, where we were wrong. First off, we were both pretty wrong here. Oh, no, we were both
Oh,
right
we're
here. We're
both
both
very,
pretty right
very,
here.
very right.
We
Yeah.
were very right. We put the over under for the number of Lugia in top cut at 6.5
Both events.
for both events combined. Maybe we were a little, maybe that over under wasn't high enough because the
Yeah,
total
because
number
there's
ended up being 12, 6 at each tournament, Azul. What the heck happened?
I mean, we've seen 6 in cut before. I mean, it's just the best deck. And we don't know about the tall numbers for MetaShare, but Vancouver is 30%. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like more good players are switching over to playing it, which is also going to impact its results, right? Um, yeah, more good players are choosing to play Lugia. I mean, even my group decided to play it for this tournament. We didn't have an impact on the top 8 overall, but like, I mean, if you have good player like you know, Caleb played against Ian, uh, round before last round or something like that. So if Caleb wins, it's a Lugia and cut. If Ian wins, it's a Lugia and cut, right? So like, we have more good players playing Lugia. When the good players hit each other, you know, that many more Lugias are going to keep pushing through the tournament and so on. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's not too big of a surprise. Like I said, we've seen 6 in cut before, seen it again here. I think the question is just like, will like Lugia? Could we even see like 7, 8? Have we seen anything past 6? Is 6 the most we've seen so far?
I think so. I don't think we've seen an 8 Lugia cut. I can maybe do a quick check while we get into this next
Yeah, I
point,
don't think
but
so. Yeah, I don't
I
think
think
so.
6
I think
has
it's
been
been
the
6.
most. There's always been something floating around in there to to give it a hard time.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we ever saw like a 7 or an 8, to be honest. Well, 8 maybe. 8 would be a little bit of a surprise maybe, but
I
like a
don't know if
7,
8 has ever 8 happened with the Palkia deck, right, in
yeah,
that Melbourne regionals, but I mean, not to discredit the Australian players, but it's like whenever it's a 100-person tournament and the 10
you
best
said
players
just
in the room
dropped.
play,
Palkia.
yeah, like, it's
And it was
not
2 different variants, to be honest, as well. It was
sure,
like,
that is true, yeah.
Natalie, Brent Tonneson, Kaiwin, Hasbani group. Sorry if I missed any names in there. They were playing like the Turbo Palkia thing. And then everyone else was playing Palkia and Talion. So I think that definitely makes a difference for sure. Also, because like the Turbo build, yeah, playing like that Turbo build because it was definitely something new, different. And it turns out at the end of the day that it's unfavored against the Inteleon build, which is kind of funny that they did so well. But just kind of the unrefinedness, I think, of the
Yeah.
Inteleon list is what really carried them a little bit there. So it's a
Yeah, and
little bit different, but yeah, that is like the one time I think we've had where we've had like 8
yeah,
in a cut.
definitely not something that has happened. I mean, we've got a handful of more tournaments, there's still a chance, we'll see.
It's also not a good thing. If that ever happens, that's definitely a sign, I think, of a bad format, right? Or maybe just an overdeveloped format. We've been in this format for a long
That's
time,
fair.
so more and more people, I think, will eventually kind of gravitate towards Lugia. So, like, if this format, if Crown Zenith had an actual impact on the format, it would have changed up at that point, right? We would have had this prolonged, uh, prolonged format.
All right, we had another prediction for the best finishing Vikavolt this weekend. I predicted a second. You predicted a top four. We were both wrong. You were a little closer, though. One got ninth place in Vancouver for a top 16 finish, and one got 17th place in Natal for a top 32 finish. And interestingly enough, as well, um, there was only one Vikavolt in day two of both tournaments. And
Yeah,
when we looked at the meta share, um, Vikavolt was not a top
Knox.
6 deck for Vancouver, and backstage, I took a quick little peek, and it was like 3.4%
Yeah.
played. So,
I did. That was
um,
a weird drop off to me because it was pretty popular
yeah,
in Knoxville, and then there was
we
2 in
both
top 8
thought
of
that it
Perth.
was gonna be around like 6, 7% again, and it
Yeah.
dropped down a bit more than I think we both thought.
Yeah, I don't, because I didn't feel like, I felt like the deck was still in a good spot. Um, yeah, Cameron got ninth, and Cameron's been doing pretty consistently well with it. So Szymanski pick it up for Knoxville, do well with it there. 2 of them were in top 8 of Perth regionals with Natalie and Haspani. So I was like, okay, it's still like doing well. Like, why would people just all of a sudden drop off? Why would it drop off the face of the earth? But then it just did, which is just weird to me. I didn't expect that. That's a weird. I mean, I don't think the deck is like ridiculously broken or anything.
Yeah.
And even your Lugia matchup is pretty close. Like, maybe you're slightly favored. I don't know. I have to test it more, but yeah,
It's a
it's
good
dropping
deck,
off
and
that much is weird.
it's a good deck, and it's fun to play as well, and
Yeah.
it feels like the type of deck that, like, people gravitate towards, I don't know, right? Like,
It felt like there was. I sat next to. I played against a Vika Vault, and I sat next to quite a few Vika Vaults. It felt like it was more popular than 3%. That's for sure. Like
yeah,
just me being in the room, but obviously it wasn't.
yeah.
What actually? Well, we'll get to that later. Actually, I was gonna say speaking of that, but we'll get to that later. And then the next one we had, the next prediction we had was what was the best placing lost box variant? And it was a top 8, but there was only one in top 8 between both tournaments, and it was the Lost Dogs build that we kind of first saw do well at Perth Regionals, winning. List wasn't quite exactly the same, but just kind of the Raikou as the heavy hitting attacker. The Raikou and the Zamazenta are your heavy hitters, and then you have your Sableye Cram. And
Listen, you are failing to say who got the prediction correct here.
that's true. What was it? You predicted Lost Dogs. I predicted Lost Ray. I
That's
wasn't
right.
too far off. There was a top 16 Lost Ray, I believe, at Vancouver, but you did get it correct.
Listen, we take our
Um,
small victories here. Yeah, there was a a lost Ray in top 16 of Natal, and then
oh, that's what I was one.
there was a turbo. I think it was
Yeah,
turbo.
that
Yeah,
list is interesting.
it
There's
was
no
the
Pokestops in that build. That's an interesting list.
yeah,
Semi turbo.
yeah, it's like a semi yeah, it's a combination. Got top 16 in Vancouver. It's like a combination of um the paralyzed build, right, with the double
Yeah.
Zekrom and, like, the turbo deck. So you kinda had both options, but we actually this guy got streamed, Jack Pritchard, and he was it was, like, one switch card twice away from pulling off the turn 1, like, donk in game 2, like, Radiant Greninja, knock out 2 Comfeys, and then he
Oh man.
lost because he just ran out of steam.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
The
was
deck is a
tough.
little bit all in.
Yeah, that it definitely feels like it, right? And then our other prediction, we had Mew back in top 8. Azul said no. I said yes, and Azul was correct on this one. It bubbled 10th in Vancouver. Gabe Smart got 10th place. Another one was in the top 16, and there was none in Natal's top 16. The best finishing ones were in top 32. Yeah, I mean, Mew just really, it feels like, I mean, I don't know. It's solid still, but it's definitely fallen from grace a bit, it feels like. There would have also been one other Mew potentially floating around in Vancouver, but it was Cal Connor who got disqualified. So we'll talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about that later. But um maybe, I think we got to put an asterisk next to this one, right? Because what could have been.
What could have been? That's true. And then yeah, we'll talk about that later. The last prediction we had was the fringe deck to make day 2. Chip picked Zorobox. I picked Blissey. There was a Blissey on the winning in at Vancouver. Unfortunately, that one did not play out so well for the Blissey, and there was no Blissey in day 2. But we did also find what we thought was the most fringe deck in the day 2 of both tournaments, and it was a Zacian V-Star deck in day 2 of Vancouver. Not a lost box build like that got top 8 at Perth, but it was like a straight It's more like the kind of like the build that got day 2 actually at Oakham Regionals.
Yeah.
There was like a day 2 at. So that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. I was aware of this deck going into day 2, but unfortunately, the guy lost both rounds, the first 2 rounds, so was pretty much immediately eliminated from top 8 contention. So we did not get a chance to feature it on the stream. But he actually finished, 44th, 40th, something like that. So, like, I
Mhm.
mean, didn't, do the best, but also didn't, like, totally flop the event, right? Like, ended up okay. I think he finished 2-2-1 on day 2. But
I also learned
had
about looking at the list, I learned about a new card in the stage
the
2 Metagross.
yeah, the Metagross I was just about to talk about has the emergency entry ability. Once during your turn, if you drew this Pokemon from your deck at the beginning of your turn and your bench isn't full, before you put it into your hand, you may put it onto your bench. If you do, draw 3 cards. So it's just a way to get a stage 2 directly into play. You get to draw some cards. It's attack, Meteor Mash. For a metal and a colorless, it does 100 damage. And then next turn, it does 100 more damage. You can stack it on top of your deck with a Rangaroo. It's kinda cute, but, I mean, I can't really even think of an an instance that this is super strong, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Against Lost Box, I guess it's like okay, right? You do 100
Sh
damage to your KOing Sableye. Oh, you have a Goon, so you can KO Crams with it, and it's got 170 HP as a one prizer, right? It's funny
Sure.
though because its ability's name is Emergency Entry, but if you're like down in a match and you're in an emergency and you need like some kind of big comeback, I don't think Metagross is gonna be like.
No, it's not about the Metagross, it's about the cards you draw after the Metagross Sizzle. That's
Okay,
it.
all right. So
Yeah,
it's just there
yeah.
to deliver you 3 cards and then hope those 3 cards are what you needed to. Yeah, so the Metagross, the 170 HP, the 100 damage plus 100 more on the next attack, that's not gonna save you. But
No.
who knows? Maybe you get boss's orders off the draw 3 and that wins you the game that turn.
There it is. There it is. Just a little extra draw. I mean, it makes you oh, no, never mind. What am I saying? I was gonna say it makes you, like, Marnie proof, but it literally doesn't
No, it does
because
not. No.
because if they Marnie you, you just draw it and don't get to use it, so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's tough. Yeah, definitely an interesting one. A fun card to definitely, I would say the most interesting card to make day 2, possibly in the entire format, to be
Yeah.
honest,
So
is
yeah, actually,
probably
you know
up
what?
there.
That probably is. And that's gonna do it for our predictions from this last weekend. And let's move on to the results of the first of the 2 regionals that happened with Natal. Take a look at that. Top 8 to start off with. William Azevedo did take it all down with Lugia. It was 6 Lugias, of course, in the top 8. And in the top 4, the first thing, there was all Lugias, but I will also mention all 4 fairly accomplished notable names as well, which is like something you always like to see in results because that shows that the tournament or the format is still pretty skill intensive, right? William Azevedo, very familiar name. Diego Casiraga, world champion from
2017.
uh, 2017, and then Yurko and Ian Fukuda as well. Definitely notable names as well. All playing Lugia, all in the top 4. Um, yeah, a lot of Lugia.
Yeah, congratulations to William. This is his 3rd regional championship win. He's also won a bunch of special events. Definitely one of the top players in Latin America,
Yep.
probably top 2 or 3 players in all of Brazil. So yeah, congratulations to William for sure. Um, like you mentioned as well, whenever we were going through the predictions, there was the Lost Dogs deck in top 8 from Felipe Urais. Pretty straightforward, similar list. Double Zamazenta, double Raikou. So I feel like maybe the double Zam is probably the more unique thing. It's got the one Sableye, one Zigzag, or yeah, one Zigzagoon, of course. Just the one Sableye though,
Yeah.
and does have a few other interesting things in this list. 2 Cross Switcher and 2 Air Balloon. Before we started recording, you were looking at this list and you were going 2 Air Balloon, 2 Air Balloon,
I guess
and
another
then
thing to
2
mention, there's only 2 quick ball in here as well. There's 2 capture.
2 quick, 2
Um,
capture. Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I think a lot of, I think like the cross switchers, maybe that's kind of it though. I was gonna say, like, I think there was probably some surprise factor for some, but really the only thing that could be a surprise factor would be the cross switchers. I mean, I would be surprised if my opponent put a second air balloon in play, but I don't think it's actually helping them at all in their game. So if anything, I'd be surprised and I'd be like, okay, it's another dead card in their deck or something like that. Like I wouldn't be
Yeah.
I don't think the second air balloon in. The second air balloon, it feels like the goofiest thing in here to me. The cross switchers, I mean, cross switchers always been solid in Lost Box, especially when we start like the first build of Lost Box, the Sable Zard. Tor kind of popularized the cross switches in there. Those are always
Yeah.
super strong. I got a little bit more tricky when you get to the Mirage Gate builds though, because like there's becomes more important cards to keep. When it was just Cram, Sableye, and Zard, you were a little bit your lost zones didn't feel as restrictive. But now it's a little bit harder to play cross switchers or something like this. But the two cross switchers is definitely interesting. It's a very powerful combo to play alongside in a Lost Box deck. I think it's like biggest play that I could think of would be like so you can use Cram as aggressively as possible to KO that mana fee. So your Raikus are actually doing, the 120 more consistently.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this list also playing 3 Raihan, so if you have one in hand, you can pretty easily Raihan for the other one, so it's, like, not even too hard to get all set up. I was joking that, if you're playing the double cross switcher, you got the Raihan, I mean, we might as well throw Canceling Cologne in here, right? Just get the Cologne, get the whole play off, cross switcher up your mana feed, Canceling Cologne, boom, I take 2 prizes anyway, you can't stop it. But no Canceling Cologne, sadly.
Yeah, that would be a little bit too far. Like when you're using
No, it's
Comfies and
not.
using
No, it's
choruses,
not.
like you
Easy
can
drop of the
only
bird
keep
keeper.
so many
Get the bird
cards.
keeper out of here. Add the canceling cologne
That is, to be honest, 3 Raihan, 4 Chorus, and a Birdkeeper is a lot of supporters. So,
and
to
a
be honest, I
boss.
wouldn't hate that. Well, the boss kind of is like not a supporter to like get an attacker going.
It's a
More of a
supporter.
utility. That is true. Technically a supporter. So yeah, really interesting Lost Box list for sure. And yeah, Lost Dogs back to back weekends of being kind of the top Lost Box deck. The Raikou Zamazenta combo. Like I mentioned, I think on the cast last week when we talked about bird, like Raikou is the best attacker into Lugia out of like all attackers in Lost Box decks. Like it just that if you but you have to be able to pull off at least a 120. Like a 120 is super strong against Lugia, even if they have Dunsparce in play for the
You have to
turn.
pull off at least
Um,
240 damage in play for it
yeah.
to be worth it, right? Either
So the
120 or 240 on a Lugia, right?
Yeah, that would be fine too if they don't have Dunsparce. Yeah, so it's like a
Right.
super strong attacker into Lugia. Um, the mana fee is the problem though. Like dealing with that is super annoying as Lost Box because you play like one boss sometimes, kind of have to in these kind of builds. So yeah, that's the problem, the mana fee. But the cross switchers, I mean, that can help you get there
Yeah, cross
with those
switcher is
mana fees.
definitely interesting. It makes sense a lot of what you said though, with like why we haven't seen it being good, despite it being good in the early iterations of Lost Box. It's just like there's too many more important things because like you can't just be willy-nilly throwing away energy cards either when you're playing Mirage Gate, right? Like you need
Yeah,
those, you need your gates, like there's just too many important things. And then we see outside of the Lost Box in the sixth Lugia, we do have a Gudra, and there's also a Gudra that ended up getting second in Toronto. So this ended up being a sticky weekend, it turns out, with the for the Gudra.
yeah. So I guess like pretty reasonable conversion rate probably from Gudra. Like what Gudra was like. It was a uh, what was the percentage for Gudra? It was like 4%, 5% at Vancouver.
In day one, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, but at day two it was like
I think it
5%.
was
I
like
think right.
yeah, Reggie's was up to like 9% in Vancouver,
Day
which we'll talk
one.
about. Yeah, we can
Oh
talk
my
about it more
gosh.
whenever we get to it. But worth noting as well, I think both of the Gudra lists are kind of just the more straightforward Colress Lost Zone engine builds, not like the heavy Marnie disruption builds. Neither
Yeah.
of the lists were like kind of doing that this
I
weekend.
feel like since Stefan has got second at
Hmm.
Liverpool, right? Everyone's
Hmm.
pretty much gone over to the double Roxanne, no Marnie, which I think is correct as well. Like I think the double Roxanne is so much better. I loved seeing that like innovation as Stefan because like it clicked with when I saw it, it just kind of clicked. I was like, oh, that's so sick. That just makes sense.
Yeah,
You
this
want to
one
be
only
using
has one
Colts early.
Roxanne.
Yeah, only the one Roxanne, yeah. But yeah, you just like Roxanne is just so much better. Like you just want to Culver's early, Roxanne late. So yeah, I think it's just kind of going to become the norm. Heavy on the parasol in the build from Natal, double parasol. You don't see that as super often. Going to be a pretty big deal, obviously against the Lugia matchup. But even when you have like the triple Temple of Sinnoh, the parasols, the Lugia matchup is still so tough for the Gudra. And we saw, yeah, neither of the Gudras made it to top eight. This one made it. This one was only made it to top eight. Still, the Lugia onslaught was a little bit too much to deal with. And yeah, besides that, throughout the rest of the top, the day two, top cut, nothing really too much to stand out. I don't think from Natal.
Yeah, a couple Arctura in top 16. It was a smaller tournament, 263 players. I say smaller, that's still a pretty decent amount of people.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
it
yeah,
was
compared to like
just a top 32 day two as well, which we don't really see too terribly often.
yeah, compared to the numbers we've been hitting, which I guess one thing I mean, I might as well mention right now because we're talking about it. EUIC is like going to probably be almost 2,000 players. The numbers we're hitting are actually like insane. That's cool to see because that means they got a lot of venue space. They're kind of a little bit more prepared for this, and that does kind of bode well for like
Yeah.
NAIC as
I
well.
think it's
Oh,
like 8 I think the number right now is 1870, but that's all 3 divisions.
yeah, yeah, but
So, it's
that's
probably
like
gonna be
that's
like
gonna
1,500 TCG Masters when it's all said and done, which
yeah, it
is
might be
still
16.
crazy.
There's really not that many juniors or seniors. It could be like 1,600.
Yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount of travel awards awarded, but yeah, I guess not. Like, I
True.
guess people are less likely to go to Europe with a family for just $1,000 stipend than, just
Yeah.
one Masters division player, right? But
Yeah, definitely. But that's cool to see. Really big, gonna be really big. And I expect actually, I mean, did this? When did registration for EUIC
it
open
was
up? It
last
was
week.
the
It was last week,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't have. I guess it's talking to like other players about it too. I think EUIC is going to become a very big tournament moving forward because it's actually not that expensive to get to London. And I think a lot of people just didn't know that. And I think especially this season with that many less tournaments, it's a little bit harder to get your invite for some players. But there's a lot of points to be gained at these IC tournaments. I think we're going to see EUIC become the pretty reasonably be like the second biggest tournament of the year every year, besides NAIC, even maybe even getting close to matching it in tournament size. Because a lot of European players, the game's grown a lot over there. But I think there's going to be a lot more North American players making their way to UIC because it actually isn't like that expensive to actually travel to London. Like when you compare it to even like East Coast, West Coast, like traveling from the East Coast to a West Coast regional or West Coast to an East Coast regional, traveling to London for an IC instead is like pretty comparable.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about it yet, but EUIC registration did go up this past week, and it was released in 3 waves as well, and all
Yeah.
3 waves sold out. Wave 1 and 2 sold out instantly. Wave 3 sold out within a couple minutes, I think. So,
It was less
um,
than that because
was it still
I know.
instantly for wave
Yeah, I think it was
3?
instantly because Jesper didn't make it. I know Jesper, I think, is usually like on point with trying to
On
get
it,
registered for
yeah.
these events, and like that kind of sucks, right? Like seeing some of even the European players not be able to go to their home IC. But I think it like the wave thing I think is good. Everyone knew the times for registering ahead of time. And this is going to be the biggest EUIC ever by a lot, I think. I don't remember how big the last one
Oh,
was.
yeah. No, the last one was
Um,
like 600 people.
yeah, it's gonna be the biggest EUIC by a lot, and hopefully that just continues, and hopefully we'll just get more venue space for next year's, and it'll keep growing. And like I said, good sign for NAIC as well. If they're getting this much space ahead of time for EUIC, hopefully they get like an equal amount of space or more, ideally more, in comparison to what we expect for NAIC. What'll be coming up later in the summer.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of a bunch of things too. Like you said, like easier to get, or it's hard to get points this year. ICs get a lot of points. The game is
Yep,
also just generally growing, but it's also the first tournament of the new format, which is another
that's true as
factor
well. That's true as
that
well.
definitely plays into things. Like people are excited for rotation every single year, no matter what the first tournament is. It always is pretty sizable, just because people are pumped. They're excited to try something new, which is understandable. And especially, I think it's made even worse and amplified by the fact that this format has gone on for so long.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
speaking of this format, we can wrap up this discussion with the results from Vancouver. Ian Robb did get his 5th regional championship win with Lugia. And once again, Lugia was 6 out of the top 8 spots. The other 2 spots going to Kobe Kawasaki, who got 2nd place with the Gudra, and to Zach Lesage, who got 3rd place with Arceus Duraludon. So it's Lugia and then 2 of like, that similar type of like tank and heal deck strategy.
Yeah. So Lamar Lugia, Arctur squeaking his way into a top 8. No real surprise there. I would say there was another in top 16, a couple in top 16 at Natal, but another one of those decks where it's kind of like Gudra. I think Arctur has a better time against Lugia, but it's still like 50-50. Like Zach would have to go first game 1 against all the Lugias probably to be like in a reasonable spot to beat them. Because if Lugia just goes first against Arctur, you're usually in like a pretty good spot as the Lugia player. So yeah, I mean, and not like it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, once the Arctur was in top 8, it was like, oh, Arctur is winning this tournament. It was just kind of like, well, I guess it's like see if they go, see if Zach can go first against all the Lugias or not, and then I don't know how it actually played out, but and I did look at all the Lugia Natal lists or all the lists Lugia lists in Natal that made top 8. I just took a look at all of them here. That made top 8 as well in Vancouver, and nothing stood out to me at all from Natal. But Stefan Tobacco, rocking the Professor Burnett, and a big charm. And what I hate about this list is only 3 Archeops. But when you have the Burnett,
Yeah, that's the reason,
maybe
right?
maybe that's the trade-off. And then Corey Godfrey, who got 6th, rocking the Greedent, which we've seen a couple times, but I think this might be Greedent's first top 8 appearance in
I think
Lugia.
it's close. It might have gotten top 8 at one of the European regionals, but it's been on multiple win and ends for multiple tournaments. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Greedent is actually, I think on Limitless, can't you, like, click on the card and see its
Yeah, that's
best
you can see it.
finishes? Yeah, so it is its first top 8. It is its first top 8.
It finally squeaked in.
Shout outs to Corey getting there with the dent. You'll have to see it. We didn't get we saw Corey on stream, and I was joking with him going into top 8. I was like, dude, you gotta attack with the green. You gotta give the people what they want. We gotta see the turn of profit, the max gimme gimme. And he's like, I just can't attack with it in the mirror, man. I just can't attack with it in the mirror. I was
That's
like,
interesting actually that Corey felt that way because I spoke to
well, it's like he said,
um
unless like Dunsparce or Manaphy comes into play, right? Like,
that's still yeah. So I talked to they bubbled out of Orlando with the Greedent. It was who was it? Alvarez. Anthony Alvarez. And Anthony thinks that it's really good in the mirror when you go second or first, but even like if they have any one prizer in play, not just the Manaphy or the Dunsparce. If there's the Evatol there, obviously you have to not prize any powerfuls.
mm-hmm.
But Anthony sounded like if that ever happens, like you set up the green and that's like the 3 prize turn that will swing it for even when you go second, you can all of a sudden turn the game around if they open like the Raikou or the Evatol,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah, it's more
Um,
to set up than Stoutland because it's an evolution, but
yeah,
it's got more HP, 320. It's a lot harder to deal with, and it takes 2 additional prizes, not just 1. And it also, oh, never mind. I was gonna say, and it also works when you knock out a non-basic, but it does still have to be a
yeah,
basic that it
only yeah, it has
KOs.
to be a
Yeah, my
basic.
bad, my bad.
It would
Yeah,
be a lot better because then you could do like a 1-2 punch with it or
exactly.
something.
Yeah.
And there's the Ditto. The really interesting part about this list, besides like I've seen the Greedent a couple times. I think Greedent's like all right, obviously very good against Lost Box, but there's a Ditto V in here, which means like I guess, like, if you're really trying to get that Greedent set up against Lost Box, it kinda makes sense. Um,
Yeah, it's also kinda like a
but if you're
4th
not using it
Lugia as well. We
yeah,
actually in Corey's stream game, there was kind of a he dead drew in game number 2, but he started the Ditto and, like, drew past going first, and
no
we were
way,
like,
you get
"Oh,
the
dang, this hand is terrible," but it was like but he could still technically turn to V-Star
yeah.
because he had the Ditto in play for a turn. So, it's, like, kinda cool, but I don't know if that makes it worth playing, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure that makes it I think it makes it worth playing if you're really trying to get the Greedent set up though, right? You go Ditto plus Greedent, and then if your
Mhm.
opponent KOs the Greedent, you make the Ditto into the Greedent, or if they KO the Ditto, you still have your Greedent. But I like, Lost Box isn't very good at doing that, I guess, is, like, what I was my thought process was. So I was like, "Okay,"
Mhm.
but in the mirror match, I saw that, I was like, "Ooh, okay, so that must be, like, the tech for the mirror," but then you say you talked to Corey, and, like, Corey was like, "Ah, I'm not really trying to use the Greedent in the mirror," but in the mirror, that becomes kinda cool, like, if you get down, like, Greedent, Ditto, Lugia, they pick off 1, you can get it back into play, get it set up. For a second, I, like, had to reread Ditto, I was like, "Wait, can it recover any Pokemon?" But no, it does not go to any basic Pokemon, it has to be a basic V Pokemon.
Yeah, I feel like if this
Um,
recovered any Pokemon, you would know about it by now, right?
yeah, you'd be playing that and everything.
There's actually
Yeah.
an old Ditto that's what it does. It's in my cube. The, from Fire Red and Leaf Green, it just any basic, swap it. Whoop, there it is.
Does it keep the effects?
Mhm.
So is it just kind of like a fifth of that's broken.
It's
That sounds broken.
busted. Busted, busted.
That just basically becomes a fifth. That's, like, better than Ditto Prism.
Is it though? I mean,
Yeah, it is.
it depends because, like, Ditto Prism I mean, it depends on, like, the type of deck you're building, right? But yeah, form variation, you may search your deck. Oh, it said it did exclude Pokemon EX, so it would have only been, like, an evolving basic.
Wasn't that how EX is evolved back then?
Yeah, but, like, there's basic EXs as well, so, like, you couldn't go get, like, a Lugia EX
Oh,
with it. But you could go get a
okay.
Squirtle and their Rare Candy and a Blastoise, I guess. But you could also
Yeah.
just bench a Squirtle, Rare
But are
Candy, and a
you
Blastoise back then
yeah, are you
because
were you even playing for Squirtle back then? I don't think you were playing for
no,
Squirtle,
no,
were you?
nobody played this
Yeah,
card.
okay.
Nobody played this card, but
Yeah,
it's
but
in
that
my
would've been
cube.
broken in, like, a Zoro box deck. Like, you go, like, Bridget for, like, 2 Zorua, one of those, and then bench a Rockruff or something. Like, as you did with Ditto Prism, but if you could play, like, 2 of these, you definitely would.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah, so that's like, I mean,
Broken card.
that's why it wasn't printed with GXs or what were they? Was it Zork EX or GX? Zork GX.
GX. Man, you
Yeah, that's why
just,
it
like,
was
know nothing about this game, do you?
dude, there's so many cards to keep up with. But yeah, I think that does it for Vancouver, right? Shout out to Ian, 5th regional win. Guja not quite able to do it once again. We saw Stefan getting second. We see Kobe getting second here with the Guja. There's a Guja in top 8 from Natal. Yeah, it's gonna be tough for Guja to close out one of these last couple of regionals, I think. I think getting to top 8 definitely reasonable for the Goo to get there. It'll be tough for it to ever like close one of these out. But yeah, Lugia absolutely overall dominating these terms. Do you have anything else you want to say about Vancouver?
Yeah, I did wanna talk about Cameron Chenoy's Vikavolt real quick. He got ninth place bubbled out, unfortunately. I don't know, what do you call it? Bubble out, or he just bubbled because like, there was
It's
3
not a
people at
bubble out.
31.
What is the other term for it? Bubbling in? You bubbled in.
Yeah, so he
Yeah, none
didn't
of them. They didn't bubble out.
he just missed.
Yeah,
He
who
just didn't
bubbled
make top
in?
8.
Who was the person who bubbled in?
It was Kieran.
Okay. Well, no, was it though? Oh yeah, it was Kieran. Wait, no,
Yeah.
because Kieran could have been. No, no, it was Kieran. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, it's not like technically like a bubble out. Like you were never in contention for the eighth for to get top eight, right? Like one of you three got lucky to make top eight. So I feel like that's where you have to put on yourself. Like you had to try and do a little bit more work this tournament. Like that's how I always think about it. Like if I made top eight,
I don't know, he
like
went
when I
4-1 day 2, like, it's
you
pretty
gotta
tough
go
to go
401.
4-1. Yeah, I
You gotta
guess.
go 401.
He got the round 1 bye as well in day 2.
Yeah, you already got that little bit of a boost. You gotta not pick up that L, or at least pick up a tie. But yeah, that's how I always think about it. Like if I'm like if there's like 3 or 4 people who and one of them can make top eight. When I make top eight, I don't feel like when I don't make top eight, I don't like. It's like I needed to do more work. I need to be one of the people who wasn't on that, who had to get to be the lucky person based on resistance, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like in those situations, never feel too bad. But cool
So
list.
the interesting thing about this list was the inclusion of 4 Crushing Hammer, everyone's favorite card in the format. Let's go. You
Love
gotta
it.
love when we get to the point in the format where Crushing Hammer makes his way back into decks. That's a great sign of a healthy format. But no, I mean, this was a pretty good innovation on this deck. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, item lock plus energy disruption is a combo that is like as old as item lock and energy disruption are in the game, it feels like. So yeah, I mean, and I think Cameron tweeted about it as well, and it makes a lot of sense. Like the decks that the things that are problems for Vikavolt are the Pokemon that it can't deal with super easily that manually slowly attach energy into play. Duraludon, Gudra, Zamazenta. So if you have Hammer and can target that down, take it out, you do lose a little bit of consistency by dropping the trekking shoes, but he did find a space for the third energy search, and he said that the thing you're most often looking for anyway off trekking shoes is energy, it feels like. So adding the third energy search helped that, it seems like. um but yeah, I don't know, I mean, do you think this is a pretty solid innovation on the deck, Azul?
Yeah, I think for it's tough to say because like I think that is kind of cool for it helps the decks that Vikavolt struggles against are the situations specifically. And we saw Cameron did take down the Gudra on the winning in. Um, it it's cool to see decks be built that way. But in the current format, playing a card that's bad against Lugia, which I'm pretty sure Trekking Shoes or Crushing Hammer, Trekking Shoes are definitely just better against Lugia than Trekking Shoes are, because you're trying to get the lock set up. Removing their energy in play doesn't really do anything when they have Archeops in play, and if they get Archeops in play, they're usually winning if you're not ahead on the price sheet already. But at that point, removing the energy doesn't do anything anyways. It's really tough to say how good the Crushing Hammers really are in a format like this, unfortunately. It's a really cool innovation. I feel like generally in Pokemon formats, as far as like evolving your deck to deal with the meta. But in this format, to be honest, I think the trekking shoes are I would say I think the trekking shoes are probably better, but I have to test it out for sure and really feel without the trekking shoes, how much does it feel like you're hurting your win percentage against Lugia? Because I think you definitely do hurt it by going with the crushing hammers over trekking shoes.
Yeah, I mean, it seems good to me, or it seems okay to me for sure, but yeah, I agree, like, it doesn't seem good against Lugia, which is
Yeah.
probably the
And
most
playing a
important
card that's
thing.
not good against Lugia,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or at least neutral. Like it's like this card is neutral against Lugia. This card's neutral against Lugia, but it helps me against Mew, which is helping me against like Arcturus. And you pick between those two, then that's like one thing. But when it's like this card is worse against Lugia, this card's better against Lugia, it's hard to not go with the card that's better against Lugia. I feel like, and that's kind of just like a product of deck building because of the format, unfortunately.
Well, we can move on and chat about a little bit of drama from the weekend, a little bit of a interesting situation, a public situation that came up with Calvin Connor. Of course, Cal is a top 16 player in North America, someone who's fighting for that day 2 spot into Worlds, is probably going to get it. Um, and yeah, he got disqualified from the event. So I think it's important to just preface this discussion with we are just kind of going to give we're going to talk about it to the best of our ability, understanding that we don't know both sides of the story, and we're not going to ever know both sides of the story, right? We're never going to hear from the judges their point of view because Pokemon and judges do not make statements on these things. So all we have to work on is from what Cal said. and people who also saw the situation play out. Um, but with that, yeah, we can get into what Cal tweeted. I think it was after round what 1, 2, 3. So round 12, day two.
Yep.
Tweeted, I just got DQ'd for my sleeves that were not even mine. I got sleeves from tags the person, Blake Ray, before the event and ran with them the entire event. This is ridiculous. I've never had a sleeve issue in my life. So, I mean, I think this is obviously like a heated tweet in the moment.
Yeah.
Just,
Good.
I will say, it doesn't matter where you got your sleeves from.
Yeah.
That has no impact on whether or
If they
not
were
it was
bad.
yeah, if there was something wrong. And then he did follow up with pictures of his sleeves later on, saying, "Here are the sleeves. I do realize they are beat up bad, and I should have switched sleeves after day one, but they are all random. Apparently, the big issue was the quick balls, but not all of them." And he did post a picture. You can see the sleeves look like discolored, a little dirty, something like that, on the sides. And then he showed the back of the two quick balls, which were apparently the card in question. I don't really notice anything on the two quick balls on the back, but honestly, this picture from the side, I mean, you can tell that there's, I don't know. Azul, do you have any thoughts before I kind of go in any further on this?
Yeah, it's hard to tell from images too. Like sleeves definitely look different, and like you can definitely there could definitely be differences that we can't see from the images that Cal showed. I don't think that Cal was doing anything malicious. The excuse of they're not my sleeves is a bad excuse, obviously, like terrible excuse. Um, go get some new sleeves. This is why I personally re-sleeve before every day one to day two. Now I know not everyone's gonna be able to do that. Sleeves are not free.
And you don't necessarily
Um,
have to do
yeah,
that.
at
It's
the
just
very
Azul kind
least,
of has the luxury to be able to do that, right? But
yeah, at the very least, you could deck check yourself, right? You need extra sleeves. You don't have extra sleeves, and you only have exactly 60 sleeves, and some of them are getting messed up. One of them rips. That's on you, and you need to have at least extra sleeves, right? If you buy any sleeves out there on the market right now, you're always going to end up with some amount of extra sleeves. Most packs of sleeves are sold in 50s or hundreds, so you're going to end up with 100 pretty much no matter what, right? So you have 40 extra sleeves. You can check your own
use
sleeves.
them, use them.
Yeah, check your own sleeves, look for anything that stands out. Even if it is just natural wear and tear, if anything glaring stands out, like I replace sleeves all the time throughout a tournament. Like as I'm shuffling, if they break or they feel weird, or as I'm going to lay out prize cards or draw for turn, or just notice the top card of my deck, if the sleeve is just off, then I'll just replace it, right? And sometimes I'll do like every couple rounds, I'll do like an actual check where I count out my deck and also like check the sleeve backs as I go through them. So um, that definitely is on Calvin for sure. Like if you're not going to fully re-sleeve your deck, that's fine. It sounds like these sleeves probably should have been fully re-sleeved. Though. It sounds like these ones were kind of done. So these ones sound like it should have been probably a full re-sleeve, but at the very least, you have to put there is um, some responsibility from the player to make sure that your sleeves are in decent condition and it doesn't appear to be any kind of markings or anything's out of like too far out of place as the player goes, right? Now, some things will happen naturally from wear and tear, and those are the things where it becomes like a little bit more, um, unfortunate when you potentially do get a penalty or a DQ or something like that from that ends up being the judge's call when it is just kind of natural wear and tear. But yeah, there definitely is like a standard that the players have to uphold themselves as well.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of interesting. So if we look at the penalty guidelines, I think the tough thing here, so such a great advantage could theoretically be gained by someone who wanted to do something malicious and cheat and mark a card or dog ear a sleeve, right? If anyone doesn't know what that is, if it's like bent on a corner, that was like a famous scandal in Magic the Gathering. This like well known player dog eared like a specific four of in his deck. So like he would always know if he was going to draw it because it was the sleeve was kind of bent in the corner. Um, yeah, I mean, it's such a thing that someone could use to gain such a large advantage that, like, I can understand why the penalty is so harsh, but if you are someone who is doing nothing malicious at all and it is purely a incident of my sleeves are just worn or have gotten worn over the course of the tournament, to just receive a DQ from that is so incredibly harsh. And even
Yeah.
looking at the penalty guidelines for deck legality under section 7.3.2.2 B2 of the tournament rules handbook, section B, severe deck legality. Infractions result in an opportunity for a player to gain an advantage, usually through ambiguity or discrepancy caused by dissimilarity between the deck list and the physical deck, or by a pattern of marked cards. And then in the examples, one of the examples is the sleeves on the special energy cards in a player's deck are slightly longer than the rest. Um, and then this would also this is where like a damaged sleeve or a sleeve issue would come into play. And the recommended starting penalty for a severe deck legality issue is a game loss. That is the recommended starting penalty. And it just seems like it's become a trend at these higher tier events, internationals and regionals, that this is just being during day 2 automatically upgraded into a disqualification. Um, Now, I think it's also worth noting, I don't know. I think like you look at these sleeves that Cal posted a picture of. This is obviously not the entire deck. Just the picture he
Yeah.
posted. These sleeves are all discolored in different spots. So it is theoretically, I'm not saying Cal did this. I don't know necessarily if Cal would do this. I'm not saying any of that. But it is theoretically possible for someone to know exactly how each of these sleeves are marked and know which card is in each one because they are all different. So it is theoretically possible for someone to be looking at the side of their deck and know, okay, I'm going to top deck X card this turn, right? So in this instance, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because I don't know all the details, right? But I mean, at a minimum, and I don't think Cal would argue this. At a minimum, these sleeves did need to be replaced. These are
Yeah.
not
It's yeah.
acceptable tournament sleeves. But I don't know. I mean, to me, it just from what we see here, it does not seem unreasonable that a severe advantage could be gained by someone who is looking to do something malicious.
Yeah, possibly. I think the big thing, I think one of the things maybe that they tie into their decision making is like how much time has the tournament gone on for, right? Like if you played 0 rounds or 1 round versus 12 rounds, you've had a lot more time to potentially gain an advantage.
Hmm.
It does say in the rules that like the first thing would be a game loss. Um, I was gonna say something to that as well.
Yeah, sorry, I
Um,
kinda
yeah,
ranted
and
for a little
remember you
bit,
can
but
always well, the biggest thing is, like, remember you can always appeal to the head judge, and I know someone who they've had this come up multiple times in the form of a warning for them, but they're always like, "No, get the head judge over here and prove to me that these sleeves are marked." And every time they've, like, forced the judges, and you can do this, um, they've always had the warning retracted because the judges have never, so maybe someone in the deck check thing initially is like, "Oh, I think this is a pattern. I think this is off. Okay, you're gonna get a warning for this. You need to replace these sleeves." Um, and the player I'm talking about is always like, "Nope, bring the head judge over here. Show me you can do it." They're never able to do it, and then they don't get the warning. They still have to re-sleeve those sleeves because they are like marked enough or a little bit. Or I
the
guess
sleeve
even in
is
that
just
situation, maybe they don't have
damaged,
to.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know if they would have to in that situation. Not damaged enough to like pick them out of the other cards. So maybe they still have to replace some of them, but they've always had the warnings retracted. So you can do that. You can always appeal to the head judge. And then my friend who's definitely stubborn about it, even when it's just a warning that they were going to receive, they're always like, "Nope, bring the head judge over here. Show me that you can pull these cards out of the situation." Because whenever they've looked at it, they've always been like, "No, I can't. I can't do it. You can't do it. Get the head judge over here. Let's see if they can do it." And if you can't do it, then you can't get a warning for it, right? Because a warning can be a big deal. A warning can escalate into a game loss, into a match loss, into a
Yep.
DQ, into whatever. So, right, even a warning can be a pretty big deal. So you don't want to have anything on your record in any tournament, ideally. So yeah, always if you think uh if you think you're in the right in the situations, always appeal to the head judge. And you can even go as far as make them prove to you that they can actually, consistently do that as well. Um one other thing I want to say, oh, I think in this situation, one thing I found funny though from a lot of responses from people responding to Cal's thing was the amount of people who were just like, what? They didn't let you just re-sleeve the sleeves. Um and we do want like there is potentially advantages to be gained from marked sleeves, right? Like that's the first thing that I don't think some people understand, right? So it is possible Cal marked their sleeves and then was taking advantage of that. Um, so you do want the judges to be like, if the judges truly think someone is cheating, we want the judges to handle that appropriately, right? So I think it's a little bit ridiculous when people are like, "Oh, you should just have them re-sleeve their sleeves every time." Now, in this situation, like I said, I don't think Cal was doing anything malicious. Is it possible that the sleeves were just so messed up that a DQ was just warranted? It's like, we don't know what kind of advantage you could be getting here. There's definitely something that could be done here. We have to DQ. Your sleeves are just too messed up. That's possible. Um, and I guess the thing from there would be if Calvin gets banned, they definitely think Cal was cheating. If it's just a DQ, they're just like, we can't just let you continue to have played this many games with your sleeves being like this and continue to play with your sleeves being like this. That's just ridiculous to allow you to keep playing. We don't think you're cheating, but there's no way we can't DQ you here. It seems like the DQ though was probably too harsh, and it seems like maybe it probably should have just been a game loss at the most.
Yeah, Cal even admits in one of these replies here that he shuffles pretty rough, and so, like, I think that's
Yeah.
maybe where some of the wear and stuff is coming from here. Now, a lot of people were also in the replies talking about another instance that happened at this tournament in day number 1, which was another sleeve-related issue and kind of trying to compare the 2, and once again, we gotta say, a little disclaimer, we don't know the entire details of either of these 2 situations. We just know what players involved in the situation have posted on Twitter. So Liam Williams, who's a well-known player from the Pacific Northwest, pretty good player as well. He got top 8 at nationals back in like 2016, I think.
Yeah.
He tweeted, "My opponent did not have acceptable sleeves to begin the round and had to leave the table in the middle of talking to judges to buy sleeves from the vendor. We received a 26-minute time extension and held the tournament up because my opponent was not ready to play." And yeah, I mean, the tournament did come to a halt for this game. This was the last game being played for a long time after the round ended. And Alex Szymanski quote tweeted and replied, and this is something you said as well, is
Yeah.
it took 26 minutes to buy sleeves and re-sleeve the deck. Did this person buy individual sleeves that they had to unpackage? And Liam kind of gave a little bit more context about the situation. Said slightly more because time was only extended from the actual round start time and not the pregame stuff. Slightly more because of judges pausing and time spent fetching head judge. I asked my opponent to replace one sleeve. The rest were also very used slash dirty, but this one had a fingernail mark and he had zero extra sleeves. But he had a second deck with him with a different kind of, but also very old slash dirty, and his proposal was to unsleeve that and use the sleeves, but in the middle of doing that, a judge told him those sleeves were no good either. So a lot of people were saying, I mean, they let this guy in day 1 who had obviously messed up and unusable sleeves, they let him just go re-sleeve and pause the entire tournament for 26 minutes. Why did Calvin not get to just have that opportunity to re-sleeve? And I think part of it does have to do with what you were saying, right? Like of how long the tournament's been going on and how long
Yeah.
Cal's been playing in the tournament, how long an advantage theoretically could have been gained.
Yeah.
Um,
But I do think in this scenario, that's still like ridiculous. They were given a 20, like that person should have
Totally
been given,
agree.
they should have been
Totally
given,
agree.
should have been given a game loss
Yep.
and then be like, okay, you have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, go get some sleeves, re-sleeve. You're going to lose game one, come back, pick to go first or second game. That was like way too much of an extension, way too much lenience to the player. Doesn't really matter how new they are or whatever, their sleeves, yeah. Yeah. It's just, that's like ridiculous. It's interesting though, okay, because I had like I miscame it to me. I had this happen at Baltimore. My opponent's sleeves weren't overly damaged. They just weren't Pokemon or blank sleeves. They were like magic or something. Um, and I didn't even notice. A judge walked past and noticed before we set up for our round. But yeah, my opponent was able to go buy sleeves, come back, and like we had like a 5 minute time extension by the time they were all done with it. Now we were setting up before round one, I guess, which is also like an impact. But yeah, um, yeah, if it's gonna be something, if it's gonna be as long as it was for Liam's game, then it should just be a game loss, potentially a round loss, but probably just a game loss. Lose game one, go get some sleeves, and we'll get into game two. You know what I'm saying? Like, definitely seems like an unreasonable amount of time to give someone, even if they weren't doing anything malicious.
He also replied to his original tweet and said, "My opponent received no penalty, by the way." So
It's
it's
hard to
just
give a
a
warning for like, it would never it would so, yeah, it definitely wasn't a match loss or a game loss, but the only thing that would've happened would've been a warning, right?
I would also imagine maybe so like people are comparing the two situations, but I think it's important to realize that these situations are being dealt with by different groups of people, right? So Cal's situation is being brought up by the deck check team and then being brought to the attention of the head judge, right? This situation is being dealt with by floor judges and then being brought to like an assistant head judge and then being brought to potentially the head judge if it escalates to that point, right? So it's different
Yeah.
groups of people dealing with different situations, different points of the tournament, so it's like I think a little unfair to compare the two, but I
Yeah, I
totally agree
don't
with
think
Azul that this is like it's unacceptable for the entire tournament to be held up for 26 minutes for a player to re-sleeve their deck. Unacceptable.
yeah, I don't think these are really comparable because, like, the the player, like, had there was no advantage for the player to ever have been gained. Probably, like, you could have argued maybe they could have gained it they were attempting to gain an advantage in Liam's situation, right? They were attempting to gain an advantage by having marked sleeves, but there was no advantage for them to actually have been gained, and like I said, I think if the judges at, uh, Vancouver think Calvin was actually cheating, Calvin will probably be banned, but I don't think that's what happened
Dude,
here. I
that's
think
just
that
not true though. That's just not true. People have been DQ'd from tournaments in the last year for cheating, for actually cheating, for what the
yeah,
judges think was cheating, and they have not been
that's
banned. So
true.
it's just not true anymore.
Okay, I
It's
don't I
just
guess we
not
don't
true.
fully know Poco TPI standards with that then, I guess. That's what always been my assumption. My assumption has always been if TPCI actually thinks you're cheating, then you get banned. But usually it's just like DQs and stuff happen because they can only let stuff happen. Like you can only let stuff go so far. Has usually been my understanding of stuff. Is like when DQs happen, game losses happen, match losses happen. It's because like, well, we don't think you're cheating, but like we can't not. It has to be a penalty. There has to be a punishment for being this sloppy or this unorganized or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So I
yeah, the
mean,
one thing
yeah,
I did want to like emphasize on the Calvin thing is like because the amount of people who I saw saying it, like the amount of people who I saw saying like, why didn't they just let you re-sleeve or change your sleeves is like kind of ridiculous. You're basically saying anyone should be able to mark their cards up until the point where a judge forces them to re-sleeve. So you can cheat up until that round and then you're good to go. Once again, not saying Calvin was cheating, but it sounds like that's so many people sounded like they were just like okay with that. It's like, okay, mark your sleeves, but when the judges tell you to re-sleeve, after that point, no more cheating. Gotta be a good you gotta be a good player after that. But up to that point, you're good to go. Mark your sleeves as much as you want, which is like it's like a such a bad take on the situation, which is what I saw quite a bit of.
and I do want to mention something as well, just as we're kind of wrapping this up, because like the sleeves and DQs and penalties and stuff for sleeves has been it's been an issue all season, and I think part of that, um, I mean, there's a million factors in every single one of these instances, right? Like, I mean, Calvin even saying the way he shuffles is pretty rough, like probably led to these sleeves being damaged. Um, but a lot of top players and just a lot of Pokemon players in general use Dragon Shield sleeves. Azul and I both use Dragon Shield sleeves. We both work with Dragon Shield. They are our go-to sleeves, even through any sort of quality issues that have been happening the last year. They have been our go-to sleeves because they are just still the best sleeves in the game. And Dragon Shield actually tweeted this weekend, our dragons found a malfunctioning machine now fixed in our
For real?
forage that caused some
The
quality issues.
machine.
And it
Where does
says
that
it
B coming
caused
from?
some quality issues to be less rare, as in like a quality issue is rare. Now it caused them to be less rare. I love how they worded this like it's lore or like it's like it reads like video game patch notes or something like that. Only a minority of our sleeves were impacted, but if you got one of these packs, please reach out and we will help you. And they've got a link to full details. So, I mean, if you've gotten a pack of Dragon Shields that's been messed up in the last few months or something, yeah, check this out, see if there's something that can be done for you here. But it seems like Dragon Shield, I mean, you don't really expect to see companies doing this necessarily, but they realized there was an issue and took steps to fix it and admitted it as well. So that's good on them, I think. They're still the best sleeves, even with some quality issues this last year, but it sounds like they're trying to get on top of that and make things back to the way it had been previously.
Yeah, yeah, really cool to see that from Dragon Shield for sure. Um, you don't see a lot of companies kind of making up for their mistakes all the time. Yeah, so I mean, even though some people have had some issues with some of the quality recently, still by far I think the best sleeves in the game for sure. Still, um, but yeah, I think that kind of covers everything we want to talk about. That yeah, like another thing, like one of the things that I like left me a little, like, bewildered about this whole thing with, Connor is, like, the amount of people who have come out recently and being like, "Pokemon doesn't ban cheaters, you need to ban cheaters," and then or do something about people who cheat, and then we see a player get DQ'd for what you'd have to assume is, like, the judges at the event assuming someone had an unfair advantage. Everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe they would ever DQ someone for this. Why didn't they just let you re-sleeves?" The judges are, off their rocker or whatever. It's a lot of responses that I saw to the situation. It's like, well, like, I don't think Cal cheated, but, like, if the judges think someone cheated, don't we want them to ban someone? Like, or DQ
DQ
them or
them,
game
yeah.
losses or match losses? Like, what is this? We're just
You
like,
can't have it both ways,
yeah, you can't have it.
people.
We can't not like the judges can make mistakes, right? But everyone makes mistakes, and like assuming that people don't make mistakes, you hope that like it's not they're not a bad person. They just made a bad judgment call, right? And then hopefully that they just do better in the future. So like if the judges truly feel, and like I said, Cal should the proper steps to take, because I even saw in the replies here that apparently this happened to someone's son in the junior division, I think. Take the proper steps to make sure you're given a fair trial, I guess. Call over the head judge, make them show you that they can consistently replicate what they think the problem is with your cards. Um, at the end of the day, it does. At the end of the day, even if they don't think that you're cheating, they do. Like, you can only mess up so many times, or have something, or be sloppy enough with your gameplay or your sleeves or whatever, to the point where they do have to give you game loss, match loss, even potentially a DQ. Which it seems like as that got to that point with Connor with Calvin's sleeves here. But yeah, like I said, I don't think Calvin was doing anything malicious. And it really is really hard for me to tell from these pictures how I feel about are these sleeves out of place or not.
Yeah, it's always gonna be hard to know everything unless you see the whole 60 card deck in person. Cal only posted a picture of a few sleeves. And it's also gonna be hard to know unless we hear both sides of the story, which we're never gonna know. So
Never gonna hear the other side.
well, with that, we can move on to everyone's favorite segment of the podcast, Guess That Flavor Text, where each week either Azul or I will pick a card, read the flavor text, and have the other host try to guess which Pokemon we are talking about. There are three lifelines you can use: what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and read an attack name. If you don't use any lifelines, you get 4 points. You lose a point for each lifeline that you use. Azul is currently up 1 point, I do believe, after I spiked the right answer
That
in
was
the clutch
ridiculous.
last week. And yeah, I've got a card picked out for Azul. Good sir, are you ready?
I am ready, Chip. Hit me with it.
All right, I'm not ready. Okay, I'm ready now. It analyzes it analyzes its opponents with more accuracy than a supercomputer, which enables it to calmly back them into a corner.
Sheesh, that's a tough one. I have no clue. First, it says it analyzed. I'm thinking of like some smart Pokemon, computer type Pokemon. I don't know. That doesn't really do too much. But I was thinking like I went to Orbeetle initially, as far as like smart Pokemon go. And I don't think it's Blip Bug or Orbeetle, but it could be Dottler. I'm kind of on the Dottler thought process here. Um, that's kind of all I've got right now, to be honest. I don't really have. Read it one more time, and
Yeah.
then I think we're gonna go into some lifelines.
It analyzes its opponents with more accuracy than a supercomputer, which enables it to calmly back them into a corner.
So calmly back them into a corner, analyzing the situation. Man, I'm so lost on this one. Let's go. Well, I think I'm gonna go. To be honest, the set is helping me out more than I ever thought it would. So I'm gonna go with what set the card is from to begin with.
One of your favorites, Vivid Voltage.
So there is Orbital VMAX in that set. Is there an Orbital though? Is that where Orbital was introduced? I feel like we maybe got the VMAX or VSTAR. Was it VMAX? No, Orbital VMAX was Vivid Voltage. I can't think of any other smart Pokemon.
Just so you know, VMAXs and Vs and V stars do not have flavor text on them.
No, I know.
Okay,
But
okay.
there is like two Orbital stage
Sure.
twos, and one of them might have been. Now is Chip trying to throw me off the trail here? What kind of comment was that?
I just wanna make sure you could
Who
I'm trying
doesn't
to
know
help you
that,
out
Chip?
I'm trying to help you out
No, I
because you
know.
think that Celio evolved from Seal, so
Well, there's also no dot. There's no Dottler in the Orbital V to VMAX evolution chain, so it would have to be separate. So dollars, I can't think of any other Pokemon that would fit the criteria of like a smart Pokemon. Besides Orbeetle from Vivid Voltage, I can't think of a single other Pokemon. So I'm actually just gonna try and lock this one in, get some extra points, and not use any of the other lifelines. I'm gonna go with Dollar.
Unfortunately, Azul, that
Ah.
is incorrect. I think if you had used either of the other two lifelines, you would have gotten off of Dottler instantly.
Well, hit me with the lifelines then. Go
Yeah.
lifelines.
Yep. And for the people playing at home as well, and we'll see if Azul can get one more guess in. Its attacks. One of the attacks is Leg Quake, and it is a stage 2 Pokemon.
Leg Quake, that is also a stage 2 Pokemon that is smarter than a supercomputer? Or what was the flavor text again?
It analyzes its opponents with more accuracy than a supercomputer, which enables it to calmly back them into a corner.
Leg Quake? I have no clue. What is it?
It is Metagross.
Oh! Oh! I didn't know Metagross was, like, smart.
Bro, his legs be quaking. Yeah, Metagross is a
That makes sense, though.
metal or it's a steel psychic type in the games.
Is there a Orbeetle in the set? Is there a Stage 2 Orbeetle?
No, there's not. There's
Uh,
one in Sword and Shield base set and one in, like, Chilling Reign, I think.
Interesting.
I'm gonna
Well,
look up.
I'm
But,
still
yeah,
ahead.
good try, but you're wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's one in Sword and Shield base set, there's one in Battle Styles, and there's one in Lost Origin, so Orbeetle got some love.
I don't know. I was kinda locked in on the dollar, to be
Yo,
honest.
this
I know,
card
like,
is crazy. I've never looked at this artwork for some reason.
was it, like,
It's like
l
Orbeetle's, like, abducting Bugsy here. I
oh,
think
you
that's
go so
Bugsy.
what is it going into the Orbeetle's stomach? What is Orbeetle? Is Orbeetle just a little Pokemon in front and the rest of it is, like, its ship or something?
The rest of it is its brain.
Oh, so getting sucked into the Orbeetle's brain?
Yeah, but I think it's, like, supposed to be like a play on a UFO, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
I don't
definitely.
know that it's necessarily getting, like, maybe, like, canonically, it's not actually getting sucked in, it's just getting picked up, you know?
Or taking him somewhere else?
Yeah, yeah, just it's transportation method, right? Instead of having to get the HM for fly,
I don't know,
you
Pokemon can
get
get pretty
sucked up
dark.
by an Orbeetle.
Pokemon can get pretty dark if you, like, read some of the
Dude, I have these Pokemon, like, color, it's like learning colors and numbers and shapes books that Pokemon sent me for Samuel. Um, and on the front page of the Pokemon color book, is a Drifloon, and you know the lore of Drifloon? This is a children's
Yeah,
book. Drifloon,
yeah.
like, floats in and steals children away. What are they trying to do, man? They're they're taking my kid away. What the heck?
It's
Alright,
kinda
well,
funny. I wonder if that's
better
a is
luck,
that on purpose or, like, maybe they just didn't know. The
I don't
person who made
know.
the
I'm
book
gonna
is maybe
tweet
not in the
that
same
this week,
department.
I'm gonna tweet that. It's gonna be a banger tweet, just
That's
wait.
a good tweet, yeah.
Alright, well, we can move on from Guess the Flavor Text. Better luck in 2 weeks, Azul. I'm getting ahead next week.
We'll see about that.
And, yeah, we can move on to Utrecht special event this weekend in the Netherlands, right? I'm not saying that wrong. It is in the Netherlands. Yes, it's in the Netherlands. Wanted
I
to
had
double
no clue.
check.
That was on you.
Um, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We can probably wrap this up pretty quick. We've done so many meta
Yeah.
discussions for this format. Is there any reason to expect anything different this weekend?
I don't think so. Like, usually something one of the things you can kinda, draw to a little bit is, like, this region hasn't had a tournament in a little while, but it hasn't been that long since the last European tournament, so, like,
A
maybe
week?
there's some stuff cooking. But yeah, I don't think there's anything to cook. I'm not even confident that Sanders gonna have anything special anymore, to be honest. Like, I mean, the last deck that Sander played was cool. I mean, none of
Had an
them made. I
Orbeetle
think
in
there
it.
was had Orbeetle in it. There was a couple of them. I think there's a couple people who played it as well. None of them made day two. Like, yeah, I'm not confident there's any ingredients left in this format to actually cook anything up. So I don't think so.
Any deck that you would not play this weekend for this tournament? If you were going to Utrecht,
I just think
what are you definitely not playing for the tournament?
I think any deck that I think even has like a slightly unfavorable matchup to Lugia, it's just not worth playing. So I think that goes with Gudra. Even to be honest, the more I've played the Reggie matchup against Lugia, I think it's unfavored against Lugia. So I like Gudra, Reggie. Um, I mean Mew and Lost Box I think are fine against Lugia, but yeah, those two for sure. Anything that you think is even slightly unfavored against Lugia, I just wouldn't even touch. even think
I
about.
think I would not play Lugia personally.
I wouldn't play that either, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, especially after y'all's performance this weekend. Like, I mean, not to say like, I mean, Grant and Caleb made day two. You obviously didn't do the best, but it just like I think like that shows. I mean, another example as well. Reagan Retzloff, obviously really good player. He made got second place to you at OCIC, and then turned
Yep,
around the next weekend in Knoxville and missed day two. Right, playing the same
yep.
deck. I I mean, I think that's indicative that. I mean, if
Stay
one of
2
the
as well at this one, I think, as well, right? Made it to the
yeah,
winning
yeah.
end.
I think he lost his winning end at this one. So
Yeah.
like, it's just like the ups and downs of the deck. You're just so not in control of your mirror matches, um, against
It
like
feels
the
like
better players. Like against
yeah.
like like there's definitely still a skill gap in the game, right? And like there's
Yeah,
still
of
going to be
course.
opportunities that you can skill diff your opponent, but it's going to come up less often. I feel like with the Lugia, or like maybe the skill margin gets a lot narrower with the Lugia mirror. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a reason for someone to choose to play Lugia if they feel like they're
No.
good enough to. You say no if they feel
No.
like they're good. I mean, it's obviously the best deck. If they feel like they're good enough, and like the difference for them could just be needing to like have a little bit of that run good. Maybe you just roll up with the best deck and hope that the run good goes your way.
It's kinda funny though, because like, so you said that about, like, the Lugia mirror, and it's always so different if you actually play a deck at a major tournament compared to not playing at a major tournament. Like, I can't really explain it, but, like, playing a bunch of Lugia online doesn't equal the same experience as actually playing the Lugia IRL at a major tournament, and so much of Lugia's matchups feel exactly like the mirror match. Your Mew matchup feels like you're playing a mirror match. Your Arctura matchup feels like you're playing a mirror match. Um, yeah, like all those matchups feel like you're just playing a mirror match. Like it feels like there's like two interactions that happen. If they go your way, you win. If they go your opponent's way, they win, and that's it. That's the whole game. The same. The mirror feels the exact same way. So yeah, it feels like it's not just the mirror. It's like 50% plus of the meta is effectively mirror matches. So yeah, it just feels really bad. It is the best deck though, so can't go wrong with it, I guess. At the end of the day, if you truly can't pick something, going with Lugia wouldn't be the worst thing ever. But I wouldn't recommend that or anything that even has a slightly disadvantage to Lugia. But I think if you're able to like crack any of these decks, like the Gudra or something like that, and actually give yourself a slight advantage to Lugia, then I think all those decks become really good plays. But I haven't seen it yet. I don't think it's possible. So.
So, is there any reason for one of these players who's like just been playing Lugia this whole format? Is there like any reason for them to switch now as the format's coming to an end? I mean, even people like, Tord Reklev or Raz or Brian DeVries, like, is there any reason for any of them to switch off or just even someone else who like maybe is just playing it, but to like less results than those three?
I don't I don't know. It's like maybe if they've had some kind of revelation and been like, well, I don't want to do this again. But I think they're all just going to do it again.
Yeah,
Especially
probably.
when you look at results of like someone like Raz. Like Raz has got like two top eights. One was them was at OCIC. Like, why would Raz ever change? Decks. I don't think Raz is going to change. You know what I'm saying? Like, if anything, I
Raz
think there's
also has
more.
like a pretty much guaranteed day two world spot already because he's the
Yeah.
the Middle East slash Africa time zone or rating zone, and he has like 600 points or something like that, and the person in second place has 50 points.
Oh, I didn't even know. Oh, yeah, that is a thing now, right?
Yeah, yeah. He's
So
from
yeah, I don't know. I
Israel.
I think if anything, just more players are gonna end up on more like players, like good players are gonna get on the Lugia train. I don't think anyone's. I feel. I mean, I'm not getting back on it. I don't think anyone's getting off it though. I don't think anyone's getting off it. I'd be surprised if players did, unless they found something really cool and really new. Would that be cool to see? But that's not gonna be like a big shift in the meta or anything like that, right?
So is Lost Box on the decline. It didn't do the best at either of the two tournaments this weekend, especially in Vancouver. Just one in the top 16, right? It did have the top eight, of course, in Natal. I don't know. I mean, it feels like, I mean, you obviously won OCIC with it, and it did really good earlier in the format, like pre Crown Zenith. Since then, though, and since OCIC, really since OCIC, because you won and Pedro got top eight. I guess I mean it did win Perth. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just these two tournaments. It just felt off. Is there a
Yeah,
reason
might have
for
just
it
had a.
to keep feeling off, or do you think like we can still see it? Like it's still totally a deck that can win the tournament.
I think it'll have better placement. Oh well, I don't know if at Utrecht it'll have better placements. 'Cause I feel like there's not as many Lost Box believers in Europe. So, but I think maybe going into Charlotte regionals the week after, we'll see just better overall performance from Lost Box. I think its overall meta percentage will decline though, because we're at like 20%. Was it at OCIC or Knoxville or something? And it's been going down since it was like 2018. Now it's
Yeah.
17.
Yeah.
And the conversion rate has been abysmal from day one to day two. So I think we're gonna see it come down. It might not even be the second most played deck at Utrecht or Charlotte coming up after that, and to close out the rest of the season. Mew might kind of take over that spot again, or who knows? Maybe they'll just give Lugia like a second space on the meta share. There'll be so much of it. It'll be like 30% Lugia and 15% Lugia. I could see Lugia getting up to like 40% eventually as we close out these last couple events in this format.
How do we feel about Mew for this tournament and really just where we're at in the format right now? I actually feel like kind of okay about it personally. Like if Lost Box is on a little bit of a decline, maybe it's not, maybe it is. But it is like, it's a deck that can stand up to Lugia. It can go 50-50 versus it. Or, I mean, some players like Andrew Mahone says Mew is 90-10 versus Lugia. I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah, that seems a little far fetched.
um, I don't know. Yeah, how do you feel about Mew? I mean, it hasn't had the results. It's gotten a couple top eights here
Yeah,
and there, but like it's definitely fallen far from grace from where it was pre Silver Tempest.
that's weird because it had like those couple tournaments where it kind of won, right? Or it got second at San Diego and then it won Liverpool.
Right.
It's been a
Yeah.
little
Yeah. Yeah.
quiet since then.
And then,
I
like,
feel like
even outside of those 2 tournaments for the rest of this
like
format,
no
remember
top
we looked at it
eights.
last
Yeah,
week,
yeah, yeah.
like,
Like
it's
very
it's
few
like
top
such a
eights.
very few top 8s for this entire format.
But it's hard. I mean, and it has always been kind of at that 12% meta share. What was it at Vancouver? Do you know? Was it still at the
Um,
12? Around the
I think it
12?
was like 13-ish, something like
Okay,
that.
yeah. So still around that
We really
12%
should have
meta
pulled up
share.
the chart
It
if
feels
we
like
could have.
it feels like it probably should have a couple more top eights in there, like just for its meta share, like its consistent meta share. But I guess you could argue that for Lost Box as well. If Lost Box is making up 20% of the meta, I mean, its conversion rate for Lost Box is just so abysmal though going into day two. Whereas like Lugia, like Lost Box gets halved going into day two, whereas like Lugia gains like 5% going into day two. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe Lugia's Mew's just kind of about where it belongs as far as how many top eights it has for how much of a play rate it has. So yeah, it was 12. Is this Vancouver?
Yeah, 12.4
Yeah.
in day 1.
So
Yeah, day
16
1.
for Lost Box. Okay. See, I think Lost Box will stay on the decline. I think Mew might overtake Lost Box. And Reggie's at 9%. Sheesh.
Yeah, Reggie's was really high in Vancouver, like, kinda
Interesting.
surprisingly high.
It
But
did
going
pretty.
into day 2, it was a little different. Shout out to Trainer
Yeah.
Hill for screen capping and tweeting these.
Lost Box took a hit. Yeah. Wow. We have 50% though, right? Yeah. About like halves. Mew, a little bit of steam. Lugia, a little bit of steam. Reggie's a little bit of steam. Yeah. Like all the top decks will get like a little bit higher meta share going into day two, of course. But yeah, I think it's still solid. Like Mew's still solid. Like I said, 50-50. The thing is like, it's your other matchups that kind of suck, right? Like the Lost Box matchups in general are poor for Mew. So your Lost Box matchup is tough. Like the Vika Vault deck is like an auto loss, basically. Like that matchup's tough. Like it's all the fringe stuff that kind of comes after you. Your Reggie matchup is tough. Like all that stuff is like so annoying. So it's like, okay, you're 50-50 against Lugia, and then everything else is like a struggle, right?
Sure, sure.
I think it's where like that's like why Mew is like a tough deck to want to play because it's like why not just play Lugia at that point then? Because then you're like 50-50 against Lugia
And
and
then beat everything else,
yeah, you
like
beat everything else. I guess maybe Mew has a really good Arc Dura matchup. It's got that going for it,
that's
right?
true, yeah, whereas Lugia's is, like, maybe questionable sometimes, right?
Maybe slightly unfavored overall, but it's pretty close to 50-50.
Yeah, agreed. So, yeah, and speaking of Dur, we've got Arctur and Goo right next to each other in the meta share, neck and neck. We saw both of them doing well this weekend at both tournaments.
Mhm.
What would compel someone to play one over the other? Like, if you're someone who's playing Gudra, why should you switch to Dur? Or if you're someone who's playing Dur, why should you switch to Gudra? Whichever one you think is better.
I think you probably just go with Arc because you have a better Lugia matchup, and I think
Yeah,
Lost Boxes when meta share will go down. Um, which is bad for Gudra because like that's kind of the matchup that I feel like Gudra kind of leaned on a lot. Was like you're pretty favored against most Lost Box builds, if not all of them. Even the Ray build, even though they can one hit KO you, it's a ton of resources to get 2 prize cards from the Ray.
and Lost
So
Box going down is honestly also good for Dur because, like, for a while, Dur had a very good Lost Box matchup, but then people found the Dragonite technology. People started playing Drapion, which is like a decent attacker in the matchup. Sky Sealstone, Zamazenta. Like, all these things add up and make it a lot closer of a matchup, and Lost Box wins a bit more. If Lost Box is on the way down,
But I feel
Durstomp's
like
looking okay.
you gotta play something instead of Lost Box, which I think Mew is gonna gain some popularity, which would be worse for Dur than
This
but
is
I'd rather
true.
have an unfavorable against Mew than an unfavorable against Lugia, I feel like. Whereas, like, I think Goo is, like, probably pretty close to 50-50 against Mew. Dur is unfavored, but then Goo's, like, slightly unfavored against Lugia. So I think I'd still pick Dur over the Goo, overall. But to be honest, it's kind of a tough call, in the end, like, and I do think Lugia's percentage is going up, so that kind of would be the biggest draw to me for the Arctura over the Gujo.
So Reggie's had a really big meta share we just looked at in day one. It was 9% day one in Vancouver,
100%.
11% day two, really high. Didn't do the best, no top eights. I think there was some in the top 16 though. Yeah, I don't know. The Regis. Also, did you see the list that Sam Huff and them played?
Yeah.
Um,
Turbo.
with the Drapion and the Thornton and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was Turbo Reggie. I don't know if you think anything's there, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Generally, Reggie's still. I think Reggie seems fine. And um, but you said you seem to be less confident in the Lugia matchup, which would steer you off of it. I feel like.
Yeah. The Turbo list is interesting. I would have to play with it to see how I really feel about it. The build, like, if that's better than the current build, then maybe. But I feel like with the current build, you're unfavored against Lugia. Like, every time me and my group go back to test, it's not unwinnable. You can win some games as Reggie, obviously. But every time we go back to test it, Lugia always just, like, is always one turn ahead, like, 60% of the time. So, yeah, I've become less of a fan of Reggie as of late, the more time I've tested the matchup. And yeah, I don't think I would, because of that, I just don't see a reason to play Reggie's. Like, um I think it's, like, okay still. And if I guess for some reason if people ever start cutting Dunsparce again, the matchup gets good again. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's okay still. If it's, like, your go-to deck right now, like, the matchup's not terrible. I might be over, um, maybe it's closer to, like, 55-45 for Lugia. I definitely think it is Lugia favored though. So it makes it tough to want to play, because Reggie's definitely a deck that I would like to go back and play, but just have never done it, because every time me and the crew are like, "Okay, what about Reggie's? Well, let's play some more games against Lugia." Well, it still feels unfavorable. Okay, no more Reggie's. And then we repeated that for a couple events.
And last one to talk about is the Vikavolt. How do we feel about it moving forward? Should people copy Cameron's list? Just roll up with the crushing hammers. Does that fix all the matchups problems? I definitely think we'll see more people with the crushing hammers than we would have previously, since it's kind of a known quantity. That's just how these things work naturally. I don't know. Do you expect to see it do well? I guess is the question. Will we see a Vika hammers in top cut?
Like I said, I don't like, on the surface or just looking at it. I don't like the hammers. We definitely need to test it with the hammers and see how much it feels like it hurts the Lugia matchup. Because I think it would definitely give you a worse Lugia matchup. You're just going through your deck a little bit less aggressively with the lack of trekking shoes. Um, but I think it's still pretty decently positioned, right? Like, especially if Lost Box's percentage is going down, I feel like that helps Vault, because the Lost Box builds that were being played were becoming better and better against Vault, right? So you had, like, the Zamazenta, which was really annoying because it's like you're only doing 30 damage. And then even Raikou is like, once Raikou starts attacking you in the Vault matchup, when the Raikou starts hitting you, like, that's really tough to deal with. So I think it's still a pretty good play. And I think with Lost Box probably losing some popularity, that'll be pretty good. And also, it's one of those things where it's like, if you just make it to day two as Vault, you're just way less likely to run into Lost Box than you are the Lukias and the Mew. So in day one, you can take an L, even two, still make it to day two, and then from there, you get to play the matchups you want to play more consistently, right? Like, that's when Lost Box only becomes like a 6% deck maybe from here moving forward, or even less, right? So yeah, I think it's still pretty good. Like, you can take those L's in day one to the Lost Box decks if you play up against them, because it almost does feel like it's becoming a less favorable matchup when people have, like, three Raihans, double Raikou, Zamazentas. Like, that stuff is, like, really tough for the Vika Vault to deal with, to be honest. Like, so I think Vika Vault's still pretty solid. It does feel like you are slightly favored against Lugia, and you're definitely favored against Mew. So you beat two of the top three. And then if you play up against some, it depends on the build of Lost Box you run up against as well. And it's not like a terrible matchup. Maybe I'm kind of overemphasizing, but it hasn't felt great for Vika Vault as of late with the way the lists of Lost Box have been going. It's been feeling unfavored, to be honest.
All right. Well, let's do just a couple predictions that we can get out of here. We only have a couple predictions written down for now. First off, I mean, the over under for Lugia in cut, we're going to put it at 4.5 after seeing six Lugia in cut. So 4.5 over under is, what do you think?
I want to say under, but I think I'm going to go over again here. Over 4.5 in cut at Utrecht. Well, it is a smaller event. Does that change anything, though? I don't know if that changes it. I'm going to go over.
I don't know how much smaller it is, to be honest. I think it's still gonna be, like, over 6,
Is it? Can
but,
we like look at the numbers?
I think you can only see them if you're registered for the tournament,
I
but,
wish they would show them if you weren't registered. That'd be nice. So you could just like see. I go
um,
register real fast just to.
I'm sure it is capped.
No, it says I can register.
Oh,
Yeah.
Azul quick flight.
No shot. If it was a
Um,
regional, I would consider it, but for a special event, nah.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna say under, just really for the sake of being picking something different. I'm probably gonna anticipate at this point that it'll be over. But we could just see it before. And
Can
yeah,
hope.
next up, pick a non-Lugia deck to make cut.
I will go with. I don't know.
There's so many
Let's go.
choices.
Let's go. Palkia and Teleon. Took a weekend
That's
off.
a crazy
Coming back.
pick.
That wild. Everyone does kind of have switch cards now. Hang on. Let me change
No,
that.
no, no.
Everyone has a
You've
switch
locked
card.
it in. You've locked
All
it
right.
in.
Palkia and Teleon.
No,
What do
I'm
you
just
got,
kidding. You
Chip?
can change it if you want. You can change it if you want.
It's what would you even change it to? Nah, I'm gonna go with Mew. Mew's making that bounce back. We're gonna see one of them in top 8. Yeah, I think Mew will get there again.
Reasonable choice. I'm gonna go with um the Lost Box, I guess, just the second most popular deck. I don't know. It does feel like Lost Box is on the decline, but someone's got something cooking. I've got faith. I've got faith for sure.
I mean, I don't think you need a cook. I think like a lot of the Lost Box builds out there are just good,
Someone
right?
good just needs to play it, right?
Yeah. Can you just the Pedro? Can you show up to the event, please?
All right, and then lastly, we actually came up with this minutes before we started recording the podcast. For our last prediction, we're gonna do a new little segment. Can we call it a segment, I guess?
Want me to do this before every tournament?
Before a major tournament, we're gonna do what we call a pizza pick. A pizza pick, because Azul and I are each going to pick a player that we believe is going to the tournament, and whoever's player finishes better, the other host has to buy the other host a pizza. So if Azul picks someone and they win the event and they do better than my person, if they get second place or any other placement, Azul, I have to order him a pizza. Same way, other way around. If Azul's player gets 18th place and mine gets 22nd place, I have to order a pizza, so on and so forth. Pizza pick Azul. And also what we wanted to do, you mentioned this as well, is like
Yeah. Do a
each one
veto
of us
first,
each one of us gets a veto, gets to ban a player, gets to say you cannot pick this player to be your horse for this event.
or no one can get to pick the player.
Yeah,
We'll take him
no
out
one
of
gets
the
to pick.
yeah.
Yeah, take him out of
This
the
one's gonna be
pool.
a little bit tough. It is the special event. I don't know how many people are registered, but generally special events, less players go to. A little bit less on the line. It's not 5K for first or anything like that. So it might be a little bit smaller event. There might not be as many of the top players there. Am I starting with this? Am I going to veto first, or you want to veto first?
Why don't you go ahead and veto first?
All right, I'm gonna veto. I'll veto Tord. I think it's a safe veto. Take Tord off the board. This will make us both have to like think a little bit harder. I think, 'cause I would imagine Tord's gonna go, but maybe not. I mean,
Yeah.
this is kind of the thing with special events is like when players are in comfortable spots for the top 16 race, you generally see less of the top players show up to the special events because it's not as big of a deal to secure that, and there's not as much on the line as far as prizing goes. Right, so it's not like, well, I could show up and win 5K. It's like I could show up and win and get like 3 booster boxes or whatever you get for winning a special event. I don't even know. Who are you gonna veto?
Just because you mentioned him by name, and I feel like that's where your brain was going, I'm gonna veto Pedro.
All right.
So I
So
don't
that
know
means
if that's who you were wanting to pick, or
I was not gonna pick Pedro.
are you picking
Um,
Stefan then?
I was thinking about picking someone. I'm actually gonna go with, and I hope they're going to the event. That's what I was talking about. I'm gonna go with Brian DeVries.
Okay.
Because Brian, I feel like is just like due a top 8. Brian isn't top 8 in a little while. It's about time and pretty safe because I think Brian's gonna be playing Lugia again if they do show up to the tournament. That's kind of the thing with these special events. You don't know as much about for sure if the players are gonna show up or not. I tried to do a little digging on Twitter. Couldn't find too much on enough players though. So I'm gonna go with Brian. Hopefully they show up and win me a pizza.
I'm actually not sure if Stefan is going or not. Um, so and I actually think I'm gonna pick Owen Camerman, who's having a pretty dang good season. So
Yeah.
I think there's room for the Sun Run to continue. Um, so I'm gonna go with Owen
Sunrun. What is that? What
Camerman.
is Sunrun?
you're running like you're running hot, you know? You've
Oh,
never heard that
I've
term, the
never
sun
heard that
run?
term. I've never heard that
It's
term
a thing,
before.
it's a thing, I
Okay,
promise.
I mean, I
So
believe you. I've just never heard it. It's one
so
of those things where it's like if I heard it, it was like, yeah, I definitely don't remember.
if Owen places higher than Brian, Azul owes me a pizza. If Brian places higher than Owen, um, I owe Azul a pizza. Now, if Azul wins, I'm getting him Little Caesars, so suck it.
And maybe neither player will show up to the event, and then it won't matter this time
And then
around.
we
But we'll
just
definitely be
share a
doing,
pizza in Charlotte.
yeah, we'll definitely be doing this going forward though, because I think it's a cool little thing for us to do. Each pick
Those
a
are our
player.
pizza picks this week. Let us know who you think's gonna do the best. Who's gonna win the Utrecht special
Right,
event. I almost said regional championships, but it is a special event.
special event. Special events.
Um, and that is going to do it for our episode this week. Thanks so much to everyone for listening, and thanks for the support as always. If you did enjoy the podcast, we ask you please leave us a review. It's a super quick and easy way to show your support. Let us know that you are enjoying listening to the cast. Also, if you're watching over on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. We get more viewers every video than we have subscribers on the channel. So that just doesn't make sense. Click the subscribe button. Come on now. Leave a like, interact, drop a comment. All those things help us in the algorithm. And if you want to stay up to date with us and the podcast, the best place to do that is over on Twitter. You can follow myself at Chip Richey, Richey. You can follow Azul at Azul_GG. And you can follow the podcast at Uncommon_Energy.
Yep, appreciate it as always. Good luck to everyone going to Utrecht, especially you, Brian, and catch y'all tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Catch y'all next Tuesday back on the normal schedule. This one did get uploaded a little bit late because we're a little bit late getting back from
I got
Vancouver, but
home
we'll
at
be back on.
midnight.
Yeah, we'll be back on normal schedule next Tuesday at 7 a.m. Eastern. See ya.